which I always think is so urgent in conversations, one of the things which I think is always so urgent in conversations is this question of, who is your influence, who is your inspiration? I mean, hero is a very problematic notion, but one can say influence or inspiration or oxygen. Who is positioned from the past, who has inspired you? And it's a protest against forgetting. Hello, Anthony. How are you?
Anthony,
is this a working?
This is a work in progress.
Tom, you don't give anyone a break.
It's actually a great moment because I was just about to ask our friend who is his hero, who is his inspiration. Have you met each other?
He's
Anthony.
one of my heroes.
Oh no, you were led into that.
Let me just do the question: who is your hero?
Who is your hero, Anthony?
I don't know. I have many. I think that in terms of the living, I think Richard Serra. In terms of the dead, probably Joseph Beuys remains my hero. I think, in spite of my sadness that so much of his personal mythology turned out to be just that, mythology, I still think that his expanded idea about what art is and how it works is the thing we all have to work on. Oh yes,
Thank you.
of course. Yes. Thank you. Yes. Now, what I need to know from you is which artist studios I should be visiting today.
First the hero. Can we have?
Definitely him.
Yes, okay, definitely him. Of course.
Thank you very much.
It's really extremely impressive what we've just seen. So his studio, he shares the studio with his colleague. So
Nick.
So that's studio you should visit.
Can we hear your hero now?
My hero is a Chinese writer and a comic. He draw comic too. His name is called Feng Zikai. He probably died, I think, 30 to 40 years before.
Which makes me sad because it's too late to interview him.
Yeah. But he is really influence on me because his most important period is his artwork is in the wartime, and his artwork give the people. He worked in the newspaper. His artwork give the people have a calm feeling, and also he at the same time he look at the people in a way that make the people can sympathize their neighbor, and that is a kind of thing I feel really important.
So he could touch many people in a direct way.
Even now, the people still feel he is.
Is this his work?
This is one of his books.
But it's interesting also because that went through publications. It's a bit like your interest in newspapers, no? I mean,
Yeah. I think
the work traveled through that circuit of newspapers, of magazines.
The newspaper is also one reason that is.
Okay, and Hans-Ulrich, your hero. Who is your hero?
I mean, Alighiero Boetti is certainly has been the greatest inspiration because Alighiero Boetti, I met him and Fischli Weiss and Gerhard Richter when I was 17, and I think that sort of was an epiphany which changed my life, as also Christian Moldansky changed my life. So these were encounters, which somehow were the reason why I became a curator. There was particularly one thing which Boetti said, which always, I think about it every day, which was this idea that he said very often the most interesting projects in society remain unrealized, because within the parameters of existing institutions, they cannot happen. So what would we have to do in order to make them happen? So this idea that rather than, squeezing practices in existing formats, we think about what could be, very exciting formats. So yeah, from that point of view, definitely we need to speak in Hong Kong about Alighiero Boetti. But it's also interesting because 19 spoke about Beuys, and I would talk about Boetti and their similar generation.
But for you, is a hero somebody you have to have met and talked with, or
it helps, doesn't it?
Well, that's what I'm interested in, because would these people have been your heroes if you hadn't spent time with them?
Yeah, definitely as well, but it helps, as Anthony says, it makes it...
Yeah, I met Joseph Beuys only twice, and so far as I was concerned, this was, in a way, the realization. You might have heard of somebody, but meeting them and actually being, I suppose, exposed to their energy. I mean, his openness, his generosity, and in a way, his passion in sharing the possibility that sculpture could change the world. I mean, it wasn't a theory that he was expounding. He lived it, and the idea of the social dimension of art. It wasn't something. This wasn't a kind of intellectual principle. He was the kind of man that he looked you in your eyes, and in some way, you knew that so far as he was concerned, for that moment, you were his world. And that's a very, very special and particular example of him practicing what he was preaching.
Which you could not have gotten without having met him.
No.
That's pivotal. I mean, that's also for me with Boiti, you know, because when I met Boiti, I was 17 years old. You know, we went to our school to Rome, and I basically escaped and went to see Boiti, and you know, he would spend an entire day with me, and we would sort of hang out, and he would tell me this thing about unrealized projects, and he would sort of drive me through Rome, and life was never ever the same afterwards. There is this possibility that you get.
But is it this adding the possibility of it? You know, this is a human being you're meeting. This is not, you know, some historical figure.
Yeah, encounters have a transformative
Yeah.
potential. I mean, that's I think what you said about boys, and that's what for me was the case with Boiti. Encounters can have a totally, you know, transformative potential, and then, you know, in addition to that, I came home, and a few days later a postcard arrived from Alighiero Boiti, and it says, you know, in Italian, "Dear Hans, velocity quasi zero, Alighiero." So that was the day I realized, being a slow Swiss teenager, I had to accelerate.
And we are all suffering the consequences of Hans-Ulrich's ever increasing velocity.
Okay, excellent.
We're
Thank
all-
you.
Then it's also interesting in the case of you that you haven't met, you know, your great inspiration. So it can also happen through a book. It can obviously also happen through, you know, because you met his work through books, right?
Yeah.
He have a artwork called The Moon. He said the moon actually have a link out from the past to that moment and the future. I think it's exactly the same thing what you're talking about.
Excellent. Okay, thank you all.